So we have a new Ghostbusters movie that's out, and it's one of those things that I think Ghostbusters to me wasn't ever really that influential for me as a child. It wasn't really a big thing in my household growing up, but I do like the original Ghostbusters. I think it's a great movie. It's a lot of fun. It's a good comedy. It's solid for what it did for its time. And then we got a bunch of more sequels, and it was always a franchise to me, personally, that never really lent itself to a giant franchise. But I am glad we can get movies like that have the potential to be enjoyable. Was this movie very enjoyable, though? That's where the question comes in, because I think for me, personally, I just don't think it's made for my type of audience. I don't think this movie is geared to what the original audience of the original Ghostbusters liked that movie for. What made the original Ghostbusters work a lot was its concise cast, and a lot of the movie really relied on their camaraderie together. That's what I think made the movie special. It wasn't the fact that they were ghostbusting. Yes, that was a product of the movie, but I never saw that as the main point of it. I was never into the Ghostbusters lore, so to speak. I never cared about the realms or where the ghosts were coming from. That just wasn't what I was watching the movie for. Fun byproduct of just great comedic timing, but that's what it was for me. And that's where we have Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, which I do love the actual starting act of this movie. I think it opens up really well. I think it does a good job at least introducing you to this new family and catching you up to speed on what happened in the previous movies, while also introducing some dynamics that could make for an interesting conflict in this one, like Paul Rudd's character trying to bond with Phoebe's, and that whole idea of a stepdad trying to get closer to a daughter. I thought that was really interesting. That was the emotional anchor for this movie. I just wish we spent more time with it. This movie has so many characters all over the place and so many plot threads following each one that none of them really get a time to breathe. You don't really have time to feel the emotion or really feel the moments with certain characters. I get it, it's Ghostbusters, it's just supposed to be a comedy, but even then, the jokes are all over the place too, because we're constantly cutting to different personalities at different points, and none of the arcs seemingly come together well. It feels like different side plots going on at different points. So the movie overall ends up feeling really disconnected and jumbled with terms of character. I really enjoyed Phoebe up to a point, but then I started feeling like the movie wasn't really doing enough to maybe make me feel like I'm on her side. At a point, it felt like she was just kind of being an asshole to Paul Rudd's character and her parents overall, and I get it. She's a teenager, she's lashing out, but I thought this movie could have done a better job at exploring that more and really just making that the forefront of the movie. Instead, we get a weird pseudo-love plot between the ghost bonding with Phoebe and that whole arc, and then you have an arc with the original cast of the Ghostbusters involved over here, and none of them are really tying together to make it all feel worth it. You could actually have a really unique angle of Ghostbusters with Phoebe bonding with this ghost and them getting to know each other, but then it feels like the movie kind of shows the trick up its sleeve with that character really fast, and it kind of takes away from the tension and the intrigue that could have developed between them. I think the comedy in this movie is funny without context of the movie itself. So when actors are just bantering, when they're just riffing back and forth with each other, it is funny and it does work, but within context of the actual movie and the story going on, it feels really out of place. It feels like this is just comedic relief that can detract from actual interesting tension and seeing what's going on. For example, Camille Ali is in this movie, and it feels like at a point the movie was forcing him into it. He didn't need to be a part of this scenario, but at a point he just starts detracting from any actual tension going on in the third act. And the third act is where the movie really starts to pick up. He just ends up stealing from it. It feels like he hijacks all of the intrigue that could have been done with this new ghost character, who's really well designed, and I do enjoy the designs of the creepiness of certain ghosts in this movie. And when you do get to explore that for the brief period you do, it is really interesting, and I love the actual CGI design of this creature that comes in the third act. I just wish we could have kind of reveled in that a little more, but in the end, we get a sky beam in the third act, we get a bunch of tropes that we don't need. By the time the sky beam was introduced in the third act, I was kind of losing my patience. It was at a point where I was like, okay, we're really resorting to 2016 tactics. And I remember 2016 like anyone. I was a teenager then, it was a fun time, but I don't need sky beams in every movie of entertainment again, so can we just please don't do that? So many plot threads, so many characters, so many different identities fighting for this one movie that it can never really focus on just one thing to make it feel cohesive, and that's where the biggest issue with Ghostbusters Frozen Empire comes in. I like the cinematography. I actually do like some of the visual storytelling elements of this, especially in the beginning. It does a good job at visually showing you the dynamic of this family with Paul Rudd and getting to know everyone. That's good. But then after that, the movie just kind of trails off into so many other things, and it never feels like it forms its own identity. It just feels like a giant walkthrough of throwbacks to the original Ghostbusters and nostalgia bait with the original cast. And you get some legacy sequel soup served up to you just fine with the original Ghostbusters coming back and just being there for glorified cameos. They don't really add much to the story of this movie. And that goes back to the fact that I think studios see Ghostbusters differently than how I think more older audiences see Ghostbusters. And that's okay. You can gear a movie towards kids, that's fine. But when you're referencing something like the original Ghostbusters, which is a little more mature for what it was made for, and it has a little more of a darker angle to it, it feels like you kind of have to provide for that audience too, if you want to harken back to the original Ghostbusters so bad. If you're making something based off an IP that you apparently love, don't be afraid to embrace its darker identities too. And I feel like this movie was afraid to do that. It feels kind of like a Nickelodeon special of the Ghostbusters instead of just actual ghost busting, even though the ghost busting element of this movie doesn't really deliver either. It's constantly distracted by tension-breaking comedy that doesn't really work for the movie. I don't know, man. Ghostbusters Frozen Empire wasn't for me. It wasn't really my cup of tea. I don't think it was honestly made for me, and that's totally fine. That is just something I gotta be aware of. This movie didn't do it for me. I think, though, this is a movie you can bring your kids to. If you're looking for something to see with a family, you will have a good time in that aspect with some people, with some kids. I think the kids will have a blast with this film if you have them. I don't. This movie wasn't really made for me, like I said, so. But I hope you enjoy it. What did you think of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire? Not much to say here for me. I kind of meant nothing to this movie. It wasn't really for me. I hope you enjoy it. Go check it out if you like. Scatterbrain Reviews. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, watch some of our other videos. Go check out Love, Lies Bleeding and Dune Part 2 as well. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.